Art of Time Ensemble presents Dance to the Abyss at Harbourfront Centre Theatre, February 23rd to the 25th. Step back in time to the 1920s and immerse yourself in the decadent world of the Weimar Republic. Join us for a night of cabaret and jazz-inspired songs as we explore the music that once defined an era on the brink of catastrophe, featuring the work of Jewish composers Erwin Schulhoff, Misha Spolansky, and musicians Wallace Holliday, Kevin Turcotte, Andrew Barashko, Drew Jureka, and more. Tickets on sale now at harbourfrontcentre.com. Use promo code CABARET25 to receive 25% off your tickets.
Hey, welcome to the Benchwarmers. You might be hearing a different voice than you're normally used to. This is Gabe. James, our sort of collective large adult son of the podcast, is currently on vacation. He's taking his family somewhere warm, which sounds lovely for his young children. But we have a really special episode tonight. It is a special day here on the Benchwarmers, where tonight I'm joined in this chair. I suppose on the other chair on the other side of the screen, if you're familiar at all with the CJN auditory universe, in addition to our show, by our producer, Michael Freeman. Michael, welcome to the Benchwarmers as my co-host, my guest co-host this evening.
That was a hell of an introduction, and I'm excited to try and cut it down into less than a minute.
Fabulous. We're at 52 seconds now. Not to get too pedantic about it, but that's sort of the gimmick of our show, is getting pedantic.
Okay.
But I'll steal it. I'll steal a thing from James. Michael, how's it going, buddy?
It's going well. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I'm excited to be here. What's the expression? Pinch hitting?
I think you're pinch hitting.
Here?
You would know this.
It's a pinch, like
better than me.
Like
but
you'll do in a pinch.
I think. Okay. Right now you're in the role of like backup cantor. Every place has two rabbis. So there's another rabbi when the rabbi doesn't show up, but like when the cantor doesn't show up, they actually got to bring somebody in.
Right. And I'm singing in James's stead.
Yeah, exactly.
I should tell all of our listeners who aren't familiar with me, because I never am on the air, that I don't know anything about sports. But I think that's okay. Tonight,
our show is a little bit different. We're talking about sports sort of in a larger context. There's been a lot of discussion since October 7th and the continued operation in Israel and Gaza about sort of global Jews' position in the world in terms of commentary. And for one reason or another, there's been a lot of instances in which Jewish athletes have seen some of their platforms, either athletically or, as we'll talk about, in some sort of like public facing view, taken away. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Michael, can you sort of give us a rundown of what's been happening globally?
Sure. So they say like three make a trend. Is that something like that? So there's been 3 instances in the last month or so that we at the CJN have covered. From the news department, you guys have touched on it, CJN Daily's touched on it, and so I thought, it would be nice to just sort of bring all of this together, particularly in light of 2 stories that have some sort of timely updates that are actually happening this week. And so the first one to kind of kick it off is the story of Leah Goldstein, who's a motivational speaker, cyclist, just like super athlete. Canadian woman. She's from British Columbia.
To bring this back to Seinfeld for a second, as we often do, this is a lot like, I think his name is A.G. Pennypacker. For Leah Goldstein, she is
Pennypacker.
She is a industrialist, philanthropist, bicyclist.
Sure.
That's Pennypacker's bio.
Okay. Well, yes. I guess you could say that she is some of those things. What she also is canceled because she
yikes.
She served. Well, hey, I mean, credit to her. She served in the IDF more than 30 years ago.
Right.
And she was invited to be the keynote speaker at Inspire, the Women's Portrait Project. there was an International Women's Day event that was going to be held, and she was going to be the keynote speaker. Was it Peterborough, I think? Yeah,
Hmm.
Peterborough on March 8th. Um, and as these things do, somebody who was going to go, I'm assuming, found out that
I
she
think that
served in the
might be a
IDF.
longer assumption. I think there's a lot of like, now we're getting a lot of like post, the internet has allowed anyone to complain about anything. So maybe just
Yeah, but
somebody
I
found out about
suspect
her.
it's the kind of thing that
Yeah.
nobody thought about for a while they were booking her. And then a
Hmm.
month before the event, somebody said something and it caused enough people at this event to freak out
Yeah.
and cancel her keynote and replace her with someone else. And then a few days later, within the week, they just canceled the event altogether
Yeah.
because it got so much backlash. Um,
So there was backlash, and then the backlash to the backlash has killed the event.
yeah, Leah was very outspoken about it. She was
Hmm.
very angry about it. She gave some great quotes to the CJN. I'll have a link to my colleague, news editor Lila Sarek's piece in the CJN. One quote she gave from Leah: "You're going to give in to a small group of stupid, uneducated people that probably don't even know what they're protesting about." Um,
Wow. She also spoke to Canadian Cycling Magazine, of which I've done a lot of reading in my time riding bikes a lot. She said a number of things, that there's zero politics in her speech. All of that she talks about is that the crap she had trying to be, in her own words, the crap she went through as a woman in sports. And that's what women are supposed to do, is listen for each other. She's mad and she's disappointed, but it is really interesting that like, I am a Jewish person. I do not fully know what the experience is like of being a Palestinian person going to a feminist event in Calgary and Peterborough. That is not who I am. But in as she said herself, like, I would love to have a Palestinian person speak at this event too. Um,
well, I think she said if there was a Palestinian woman, I would go or something.
yes,
She wouldn't be protesting. Yeah.
yeah,
I
and
guess my question is the one thing that I kind of have to nitpick on Leah here, and I would have asked her, is she said, I think in her response, like, they're obviously targeting me because I'm Jewish. I think it's pretty obvious that they're targeting her because she was in the IDF and not because
yes,
she's Jewish. And I do think that's a pretty important line to draw. Like when we're
I
doing the whole anti-Semitism is not anti-Zionism kind of conversation and is anti-Israel, anti-Semitism, whatever. Um, I think it's pretty like she was like the line is Israel support for the IDF, and we're going to be touching about this later because a lot of other stuff also involves the IDF.
yes,
Um,
not all of it,
so
but
I mean,
only some of it.
but some of
I
it,
Yeah,
that's right.
I think there's a lot of like, again, I agree. I agree with you that probably it is not strictly about her Judaism. That said, her family was raised in Israel. The military service is mandatory. And I'll split the difference with you here, and that being Israeli altogether, just being Israeli, is the same thing as being in the IDF in my mind, because you can't be one without the other. Actually,
Well,
you
she
can be
also
in the
said
IDF
she
without being
she
Israeli.
also
But
said that today at age 55 she would be happy to go back if they like drafted her back in, like if they
yeah,
needed her.
um, I would also, I'm a little wary of specifically critiquing or nitpicking her statements, as you are. You're a bolder man than I, as she is also a former world kickboxing champion.
She would kick the crap out of me.
She
I
she
think
she
it's I think
cracks
it's
heads on nerds all the time, I assume.
I would assume the same. Nonetheless, the distinction almost doesn't even matter because IDF involvement 30 years ago or being Jewish should not disqualify you from giving,
Agreed.
not even disqualify you, but cancel after the fact, giving a keynote and then disrupting an entire International Women's Day event that is now just crumbled
Is now just gone.
because of infighting. Again, this is an event in Peterborough that collapsed because of one woman's involvement in an army 30 years ago, halfway around the world.
Yeah, that's right. That Yes, and in this, she is a remarkable athlete, and probably an extremely inspiring speaker who's got a lot to say about her journey and her experience. And she calls it non-political, other than the experience of being a woman in sports. So I
Yeah.
agree with you.
Well, if anybody wants to hear it, she's got plenty of stuff on YouTube. We should move along
Yes.
to the next big.
Sure, you're keeping it snappy. You don't have to give me hand signals. You don't have to do. You're live on tape as the producer.
I wish you guys would do a little bit more of this instead of
Hey,
me just typing furiously at you.
Listen, man, what we do is jazz, and you can't rush jazz. You got to listen to the jokes we're not telling to really understand the jazz. But and speaking of which, I think it's my turn to talk about somebody who was canceled.
Sure.
Although he is not totally quite still on the team, but a quick follow up on the former captain of the South African youth cricket team, David Teeger, who is removed from his post with the official explanation. The official explanation from Cricket South Africa is to keep security of fans and players as they expect, protests at the tournament, of which there weren't actually that many now that it's happened. That said, what it actually happened sort of at the beginning is David Teeger won an award at a Jewish community event and dedicated it to the state of Israel and every soldier fighting so we can live and thrive in the diaspora, which is actually a pretty nuanced thing to say. It's not like, I think Israel needs to crush anyone, or just sort of reflected the
He's not just saying Israel has a right. He's not just saying Israel has a right to defend itself, which is like the generic line.
Yeah, it's not the generic line. It is, Israel keeps us safe against anti-Semitism, which is ironic because of what had happened. So allegedly what happened afterwards is that statement led to an official complaint from the Palestinian Solidarity Alliance of South Africa, the PSASA, to determine whether or not that he broke the code of conduct. Cricket South Africa actually found out he did not. Their official report said he did not break any code of conduct, but anyway, removed him from the position. They asked him to quit. He said no. They removed him later anyway, which is like, the whole thing is a little awkward. It goes even deeper. This is not, I know a lot of Jewish people, especially a lot of South African Jewish people, are sort of torn between some loyalties right now, given that South Africa is sort of leading a international legal challenge to the Israeli army, and Israel's response to October 7th.
Well, not just the Israeli. I mean, they're the ones who launched the what was it, in the United Nations? Is it a claim of genocide?
Yes, that's the one. That's exactly what I'm talking about. They're sort of overall. So the actual government of South Africa released a statement a couple of days after this. We never covered this on the podcast because it happened after we recorded, but generally speaking, the official government party, it wasn't on government stationery, it was on party stationery, but the ANC released a statement that said, "Congratulations to the new captain," and he has replaced the, quote, "Israeli genocide supporter," which sort of, I think, escalates it a lot further than what Teeger actually said. I think, this comes from an article in The Guardian.
That's anti-Semitism.
Yes, that's anti-Semitism. I would agree.
That's anti-Semitism, folks.
Completely. So, currently, after meeting the Cricket South Africa, the head of the South African Jewish, I think it's the SJABD, which is the same organization that gave David Teeger that award. The head of it met with Cricket South Africa and said, they told us they don't actually have security concerns. They admitted it, but it's likely political interference from the ANC, which is what the belief now is that it's not up to Cricket South Africa, but it's the government sort of taking a political swing.
This goes straight to the top.
It goes straight to the top. And at the very least, to finish the quote from Zev Krengel, which is a 10-bell name, really hell of a name for Zev Krengel.
Yeah, pretty
said,
sure he ran a corner store in New York in the 1920s or something. What was that framework?
exactly. It's a sad day for Cricket South Africa, and that the only way they felt they could run a tournament is to strip a Jew of his captaincy. None of them can agree on anything. It's a sad day for CSA, a sad day for South Africa, and it's a black mark on the International Cricket Council. One thing I also just want to quickly point out before we do this, this is a global story. Cricket is the most watched sport in the world. It's in a million different places. Um, it's a really great opportunity to look at how different
Wait,
headlines cover
did you
different
say
stories.
did you say cricket is the most watched sport in the world?
It is
More than soccer?
more than soccer. The World Cup final, I think, in the last Cricket World Cup is the most watched broadcast ever, and the it's 1 and 2 with the last Soccer World Cup, and this past Cricket World Cup, I know that internet capabilities are changing. It is the most live streamed event ever. Like, nobody has watched more things on the internet, live sports, than the Cricket World Cup this past year.
Wow.
Anywho,
You wanted to talk about headlines or something?
yeah, I just want to read 3 quick headlines. Haaretz, their headline is, quote, pure anti-Semitism. South African Jews slam cricket body for stripping Jewish players of captaincy. CNN is David Teeger, colon, Cricket South Africa denies anti-Semitism accusations. And perhaps in my favorite one, The Guardian, ICC steers clear and row over cricketers' pro-Israel comments, which is, very, very British. I feel like a cricket row is complete, that's central casting.
Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to find enough probably North American speakers who even read the word row correctly.
Agreed. One other point about David Teeger, his speech sort of comes to mind the classic Kevin Durant MVP speech to his mom, "You the real MVP." I'm sure you're familiar with that speech as a hoop head. You are, Michael. And sure. Then became meme. But what David Teeger actually said was, what he actually said is, yes, I've been given this award and I am the rising star of the Jewish community, but the true rising stars are the young soldiers in Israel. So in his mind,
is he doing interviews? We should try.
He's not. He has not spoken to the media once. Hey, if you think you can get him.
You know what? You'd be surprised how many people normally don't do interviews, but then when they hear that our show is called Menschwarmers, they're immediately won over. I'm not even kidding.
Who did we get an exclusive on?
Not an exclusive, but like Coach David Thorpe.
Yeah,
he said.
Yeah, Thorpe.
He said I'm not doing a lot of podcasts anymore, but when you told me the name was Menschwarmers, I had to do it.
Yeah,
I actually think our live show with Michael Landsberg got a similar response from Landsberg.
Yeah, I think so too. As well, Jeff Perlman told us that he did it because of the name.
So all we got to do is slide this name somehow across his radar
into the message to David Teeger, and will be the people he speaks to. That's also like LeBron. It's like LeBron doing his decision with Jim Gray. David Teeger speaks publicly to a Canadian Jewish sports podcast. Not a lot of cricket fans in this country, but a lot of people listen to it.
That's right.
The other quick, this one, there aren't a lot of updates since we've talked about it, but another, example.
Well, there is one.
Keep you going. There's one update. Okay. I'll recap it briefly. Mike, you'll give that quick update. The Israeli national youth team was temporarily banned and then renewed into a double IHF World Championship hockey tournament. They appealed. They were allowed back in, and then they won the fucking tournament.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
It's pretty much it.
They were like, hell yeah, canceled, then they're brought back. So I'll put back on my head of CJN podcast hat for a second and remind listeners that the CJN Daily's Ellen Bessner has been following this story pretty closely, mostly because of how many Canadians are involved in Israeli hockey and how many Canadians were involved in the founding of Israeli hockey, which longtime Menschwarmers listeners will remember. What was the name of the guy who helped found it? We had it on the show, Paul something?
I was away for that episode.
So you didn't listen to it.
No, I
And
did, but I don't remember his name.
that's fine. His name is Paul something. Anyway, he was a very nice guy. He was on our show. Um, the point is, Canadians are pretty foundational to Israeli hockey, and as a result, the CGN has been pretty on top of our coverage, thanks to Ellen and all her connections there. Um, and she pointed out something that uh, she she pointed out an update that's actually current as of this week, as of yesterday. A couple only Israeli Hebrew language media outlets have been reporting on the legal hearings that have actually happened this week. Um, I'm reliant on Google Translate from like Israel Hayom and articles like this and publications like that. I mean, so it's a little unclear to me the specifics, but the gist is that there are legal hearings happening at some court for international hockey. I do know it's a Canadian judge. They mentioned that, and basically there's hearings going on. As far as I can tell, the hearings do not affect the next three events that Israel is competing in this year. There's
Mm-hmm.
a men's tournament in Serbia. There's boys under 18 in Spain, and there's a women's tournament in Estonia all throughout 2024. As far as I know, Israel's just going to those. I don't think the legal proceedings, the legal court case has anything against it. As far
Yeah,
as I know, the legal
think they're
court,
allowed to play until the decision has been made.
but even once the decision is made, I thought the decision was about Israel and the Olympic Committee of Israel and Team Israel suing the IIHF for discrimination. I
Oh, so
That's
it's
what I
not.
think this court case is about.
Gotcha.
I don't think
So
it's about because they already rescinded, like the IIHF already rescinded the order, right? Like they said, okay, fine, you can come.
yeah.
So I don't think it's like, but we're still barring you from the others. I thought it was about like a discrimination suit, but again, I'm sort of reliant on Hebrew
So
here. So if anybody knows more about this, feel free to
I do
write
know.
in.
I do know that they're on a case by case basis now. Is with the
Okay.
double IHF. We will continue to do look at Israel on a double IHF in this case. I am having a bit of like a tough time. What I'm conceptualizing of this all, and I'm not trying to compare the two countries, but like banning countries for political reasons is not new. That's a thing that's happened in sports in all sorts of levels.
I mean, Russia
What I think,
recently in the Olympics was a
yeah,
big one.
with Russia and previously, apartheid South Africa and those countries who support it were banned from the Olympics for a long time. But they're not punishing individual athletes. So the way the Russia Olympic bans work is that if you're Russian, you go to the Olympics and you're just an independent athlete and you compete under the Olympic flag, you could still go and win a gold medal. But that's not the case of what's happening with Israel in a lot of cases, especially in the case of David Teeger. He's allowed to play, but like in the background. So, his also, he's not Israeli. He's just a Jewish guy in South Africa. So like a lot of a lot of the, it seems to be much more about a connection of identity in this case than it is a connection of you are funded by the same government that is doing a thing we disagree with.
Yeah, I mean, the reason for both the cricket guy, so David, and the Israeli hockey team, the reason for banning them is ostensibly the same,
Quote
which is
unquote.
for your own security, or we can't guarantee your security, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually something that's going to come up again, or that has come up again already outside the sports world, which we'll talk about. We'll talk about briefly at the end of this. So yeah, I mean, I think by this point, it's the cover has been pretty much blown off that excuse.
Yeah,
Like you
I think
see,
so too.
the fact that Israel was back in the Bulgaria tournament and nothing seemed to happen. The fact that the cricket thing was, as you said earlier, just sort of elevated and turns out was maybe some sort of giant national conspiracy,
Yeah.
pretty much confirms that it has nothing to do with security concerns. And I don't even know that it's anti-Semitism so much as it's the organization saying, we don't want to deal with this. Like, we know
Yes.
there's going to be backlash due to your participation, and we just don't want to deal with it. It's just easier if we cut you and make everyone else happy than include you for the sake of equality and try to defend it.
Totally agree. I think it's almost certainly not. It's almost certainly not. They don't want to have the conversation. I think is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, what is there even a conversation to have? Like, just let the people play the sport. It's sports.
Right.
You're not even talking.
Right. They don't have to answer anybody.
Just let
conversation is
the
the wrong word.
Just let the people play the sport. It's a game.
Yeah.
Let them play the game.
It's a game. That's exactly right. Yeah, it's the
Not only is a
tournament
game,
didn't.
in the case of Team Israel hockey, I mean, there's like under 18 game. Like it's a game played by kids. Like it's not.
Right, no, and same thing. Same goes through with David Teeger. Like he was a young guy, right? Like you're right. We're now in this case talking about children, literally children.
Literal children.
So now that the tournament is over, I'm really quickly because I didn't. Oh, here it is. South Africa lost in the semifinals. They wound up losing to India in the semifinals. Teeger did not have a very good semifinal match, unfortunately. He seems to have not performed sort of best of this tournament. And to be honest with you, I don't quite blame him. He had what seemed to be a really, really, really rough lead up to the tournament. So, in that last game where they lost, he didn't have the best game of his career. And I don't blame him.
It's gonna be rough. It's gonna be hard. A lot of sports. I don't know the degree to which sports is mental. I think it's a lot.
I think it's a lot.
It's hard to keep your head straight.
I mean, he's their number 3 batsman, so he's the first guy off the bench when they're hitting. Like he plays a really, really big role on the team, and I'm not surprised to see that he might have had a little bit of challenge.
Well, I'll say this: if he ever wants to come on the air and talk about it, we're here for him.
Yeah, would love to. Absolutely love to.
I say we take a short break and then come back and
to
talk
a little bit of the non-sports world.
Well, yeah, how this is a trend that extends beyond the world of athletics. That's right.
Don't take half measures when it comes to home security. Alarms and cameras work, but they'll only tell you that your worst nightmare just came true. Safety Screen by Metalex for windows and doors will keep your family safe and sound with real stopping power. They can't be cut, pried, or bashed in, so you can enjoy carefree ventilation in the spring and fall with peace of mind. And protect your fixed windows and doors with rock glass, an absolutely unbreakable clear covering. Call 416-638-2539 or visit metalexsecurity.com to book your free consultation. That's METALEX security.com. Remember, prevention is always better than the cure.
So one of the reasons that I am here, because I don't know that much about sports, is that this whole sports cancellation culture wave really isn't specific to sports. It's actually a trend that really extends beyond it in kind of the broader, I would say, arts, entertainment, culture world.
What Mike may sort of, I don't want to say lacking is the wrong word. What Mike specializes in is sort of a more holistic understanding of the world at large, as opposed to our myopic view through little silly games.
You know a lot about things nobody cares about, and I know a little bit about a lot of things that nobody cares about.
And that's what makes us a good team.
There you go. So, but basically it's more about the arts world, where there have been a lot of similar cancellations of Jewish and Israeli artists for a lot of similar reasons. And I just feel like it's nice to put this kind of conversation into context, particularly in the Canadian perspective, but a little bit beyond as well. So the big Canadian story that followers of the CJN may have heard of is, of course, The Runner, which is a play by a Canadian playwright named Christopher Morris, who is not Jewish nor Israeli.
Right. Christopher, that's a hint.
Yeah, I mean, Morris too, to be honest. So he wrote a one-man show in which I believe he's on a treadmill the whole time, acting as a member of saga, which is like a first responder kind of organization that helps people in Israel, soldiers in Israel. And the whole play, ironically, deals with this character who's an Orthodox Jew, deciding in a split moment to help a Palestinian woman and not an Israeli soldier.
Interesting. That's the whole point of the play. The
whole point of the play is a moral dilemma between who to help. And I don't think that anybody who has been pushing for this play's cancellation in recent years knows anything about that or what the play is or has read the play. The playwright Christopher Morris, as the one-man actor, he plays multiple characters, and one of the characters is a very racist Israeli guy. So a lot of the criticism is that the play propagates racist, anti-Palestinian themes, which is only true insofar as the character is racist and it's an
Right.
accurate depiction of racist
Oh
Israelis
boy.
that the audience
It's
is
critical.
welcome to. You can think whatever you want about. Yeah, like that's what art does.
Mhm.
The point of art is not to ignore the reality of these people, because that's how you get Donald Trump as president. It's to
Right.
understand these things and not just shunt them off to the side. So
That's
whatever. Long
really
story short is,
fascinating.
so it was being put on at the Belfry Theatre in Victoria, BC. It was canceled to quite a loud number of protests. In response, Vancouver's Push Festival, which is another theater festival, uh, loudly said, "We are still going to be putting on The Runner." Which, by the way, the play came out in like 2019, I think. Like, this is not a new production.
Right.
It's just it comes up every now and again.
And
So
did
they were going to
it
put it back
air at
on,
the Push
and
Festival, or is it happening at the Push
so
Festival?
so the Push Festival said they were going to put that on next to a Palestinian production,
Hmm.
and they were going to present them like side by side because both
But
sides are
again, the
deserve
guy
equal
is
hearing.
not Israeli who wrote it.
He's not Israeli. He's not. It's not an Israeli play. He's not Jewish. No.
Right.
Anyway, so the Push Festival said they were going to put it on, and then 2 weeks later they said, actually, we're not,
It
because too many people got mad at us,
we should call it.
including the Palestinian playwright who was being touted as the like both sides success story. She was like, I'm not going on next to this Zionist trash or whatever, and so they took down they kicked out Christopher Morris. Poor guy, who's like he's a victim of anti-Semitism without
Right,
even
without even
being
being Jewish.
Jewish.
They should call it the Push Over Festival.
I'm sorry that the team at Culturally Jewish didn't come up with that one.
Yeah, hey, that's okay. That's
But
they can have that one for free.
but yeah, it's interesting because initially the Belfry Theatre, the original theatre in Victoria that canceled the Runner, they cited the security. They used the security line as well. They
So
said, we cannot guarantee the security of Christopher and of the audience and of all this because it's so controversial just based on the fact that it has Israel in its content warning or whatever.
So it's interesting you bring this up. There is one security example I could find where it may have actually been the case. Um, there, the artist Matisyahu, who many of you out there in Radio Land and Michael you might know of. He was famously a Hasidic reggae singer, who's now, I think he's still quite religious, but I think he's gone towards more of the modern Orthodox vibe. He shaved his beard, he still wears tzitzit, but he like sort of now he's like a hacky sack dude. I would say that's his current vibe. Anywho, he had a show at an art gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the show was canceled, within 20 to 30 minutes before he actually went on stage because of how big the protest outside was. The theater just said, we're going to shut this down and shut it down. Where it gets controversial is the following day, his next show also canceled their show without any protest going on. He had another show in Tucson, Arizona the following night, and they canceled it beforehand. What Matisyahu did instead, which is actually probably, the best, rightest move, is he just did a free show in the park. Said, if you still want to come see me, don't need to pay, don't need to go to this theater, it doesn't want us.
And there were no security problems at all.
No security problems at all.
Nobody was throwing tomatoes at him, or
nobody was throwing tomatoes. And again, it could be I have a hard time finding exactly what Matisyahu, how much he talks about Israel. I think he talks, in my experience of Matisyahu, he talks more about like one day we can all be a big human family that lives together.
Wasn't what was his big song? Wasn't it like Peace, like One Love or something?
Yeah,
like,
one day.
One day.
One day, one day. And the other one about like Yahweh. He talks about that too. Actually, seeing more recent pictures of him now that I'm watching this story too. One, like he now seems to have a long white hair and white beard. His image these days is a little like Hasidic Jerry Garcia. Maybe that's it a little bit more, but
he's become an earthy Jew.
Yeah, he's real crunchy.
Of the Adama.
Yes.
Well, it's good to know that. I mean, he at least made the fans happy and put on a free show. And,
exactly.
And did that.
And maybe one day, everyone will be together.
So just to touch on a couple other little cultural tidbits. I'm just throwing everything back to the CJN because we've been covering so much of this. Really,
Please.
what I'm trying to do is just string together all the stuff we've been covering in the last
Hmm.
month or two. My colleague Jonathan Rothman, reporter at the CJN, he wrote a fairly lengthy feature that was all about the arts, Jewish artists being canceled,
Hmm.
and it focused primarily, kicked off with the Yuck Yucks fundraiser for the
Yes.
Friends of IDF downtown in Toronto at the flagship. And so obviously there were, I mean, you put on at a Yuck Yucks comedy club in downtown Toronto, you try to put on a fundraiser for Friends of the IDF. Yeah, you're going to get protests.
Absolutely.
And Mark Breslin, who's the owner, who was just on actually Ralph Benmergü's podcast at the
Old
CJN.
friends, I'm sure.
Old friends with your dad too.
I know that.
They were all part of that.
They both are, yeah.
Part of that original
That scene,
crew of
the Yuck
stand-ups.
Yuck scene.
Yeah, we should get your dad on the podcast. That would be nice.
He's currently actually at the Coyotes, the Arizona Coyotes game in Phoenix, where you are, Mike. To which he just texted me asking if Nick Schmaltz was Jewish. Nick Schmaltz, good Mike Jacobs All-Star, but not Jewish. I guess, he's watching Nick Schmaltz while you and I are chewing the fat.
Okay, yeah, sure. Anyway, but Mark Breslin, no stranger to controversy, kind of embraces it. Just no press is bad press kind of guy. He says the show was sold out anyway, the IDF fundraiser, which did go on about an hour late, and so it talks about how people are going after not just Yuck Yucks, but also like Humber College, which is associated with Yuck Yucks. They have the comedy program,
yeah,
where you can get a degree in comedy or whatever. And he also talks about how people are canceled an ongoing comedy night held by a Jewish guy at the Comedy Bar, totally separate comedian. There was an event like Laugh It Up for Israel that was canceled as well. So there's really, as you read the article, it's a very long article, and the longer you scroll, the more you're like, oh, there's just more. And like all of this is just in Canada. But the idea that it's like if you are a Jewish or Israeli comic or artist or theaterist, or not even Jewish in the case of Christopher Morris, right?
Yeah.
Then you just it's not. I mean, I don't like using this phrase, but like it's not a safe place to be.
Right. For expression, we haven't seen any like violence much. I mean, we've seen some, but like not during a performance or anything like that. Just the expression.
And it's particularly hard just to sort of tie a bow on all this. Like when you don't let stand-up comics who are famous for free speech, or plays like The Runner, which are very deliberately looking at both sides of a centuries-old conflict, or any other artist or person with a voice, when you don't even let them have the platform, I don't know what the end goal is. Like, at what point can they start producing their art again?
Right.
Because at this point, is it that once the war is over? Because I mean, the West Bank's still going to be occupied by the end of this. Like Gaza won't be in good shape.
Maybe some people think it's never.
And that's the case. So at what point do the institutions that are conceding to them, the pushover festival, as you put it, the pushover festivals of the world, at what point do they start accepting? Festival. Now that they've said it's okay to cancel Jewish and Israeli or Jewish and Israeli adjacent content.
Right.
At one point, do they say, no, now we're going to start airing this again? I honestly don't know that there is an answer. I think the dam has been broken. And I don't think it's necessarily even anti-Semitism. Like, honestly, I don't. I think it is people who absolutely hate Israel, and Jews just happen to be the majority of people in Israel.
I mean, I think
who are doing this stuff here. Like, it's not anti-Semitism in the sense that it's not people who hate Jews and have stereotypes against Jews. It's people who hate Israel and have stereotypes about Israel in their heads.
I think that's mostly true. I think what sort of blurs the lines is that the people who are the loudest about it tend to also be loud about Jews themselves. I think what makes it scary is that you're never really going to know for sure why someone has a strong opinion on Israel.
It's not uniform. I mean, you brought up the South African example is probably a good one where the hidden ulterior motives maybe came to light. Jonathan Rothman's piece talks about, I think, I forget which cultural event was the target of this, but there's like specifically Jews against Israel was one of the groups, or Jewish anti-Zionist of Toronto or whatever.
Yeah.
Some acronym like that. they're the ones who were like spearheading the
Right.
cancellation campaign. So I mean, it's all too murky, but the common thread is definitely Israel. Obviously, I I, I just I don't know where it ends, and I don't think the people in charge of these institutions have thought that far ahead. I think they're reacting to in the moment,
No, yes. And I
and they're
think that
swerving
that
based on no principles at all.
yeah, yes, it is the easy way out for anyone who is making a decision like this. And I understand if you're running a venue, you don't want people to riot and smash your art gallery. Like, I get that, but also, you are taking bookings because you're running a business and trying to make money. You are selling tickets to an event because you think people want to go to it, not necessarily because you support one way or another. I think that's we bring political intent into so many things that may or may not have it. In David Teeger's case, as we talked about it earlier, his intent was to say, I just play cricket and there are more important things out there.
Well, let me ask you this, and we'll sort of wrap up on this
Yeah.
note, just to bring it back to
But
sports.
does the Talmud
'Cause
not say?
well, I was going to say, I mean, there's so much made about sports being inherently political or not, right?
Yeah.
You guys have talked about this because Israel is always involved in the Olympics, so it's always
Yeah.
kind of an ongoing debate. But I mean, sports are supposed to be unifying, right? You hear
Yes.
about these great sports moments of, the US playing Iran in soccer or something, or
Yeah.
like different, Olympic teams like competing. Like the whole point is that you set your differences aside and you play the game, and
Yeah.
it's a moment of unity, even in competition. So my question is it fair for Israeli athletes now to claim that sports are not political when people are pointing at them in a political way and banning them because they're associated with an
Oh,
organization? Like, are they or are they not political? I feel like there's a bit of a blurriness there.
I don't think that's the right question. I
Okay.
think sorry, not to I am of the opinion that sports are political and they're also a large venue for political comment, and that is perfectly fine and perfectly good. If sports weren't political, we wouldn't have like military, we wouldn't all stand up and clap for the guy who, you know, was in the military. At every halftime and such. Like, they are an opportunity that is often used as an opportunity for political speech. However, I don't think that because the sport is a venue for political speech means that it is acceptable political speech to restrict access to the sport. I think that the concept of competition and quote unquote the level playing field is what transcends the political. Where it is political is somebody's chosen behavior once the game has begun or surrounding the game. A famous example, like I think a great example for a political statement, if again, I would actually find this like quite refreshing is, let's say you're in Bulgaria, it's the IIHF team, some team really doesn't want to play Israel for whatever political reason. They don't lobby to get them banned. They show up, they take a knee, or they, wait a minute to get on the ice, and then they play. And like, your statement is made, and then the game goes on as intended. Because the actual competition, I think, is separate from the politics. It is just a venue for politics to happen.
Just because you have the stage in the audience, I mean.
Yes, that's my theory. There's always been political statements done by athletes, and in games there will always be that. But I think for me, where the line is whether or not the event itself, the staging of the event, is a political act or not.
Right. Okay, I hear you. So, in other words, everybody's wearing their country's flag. Everybody has moments of patriotism or protest against if they want to use it to protest their own country or something like that.
But sports are always unifying.
But the stage itself
Yeah.
is sacrosanct.
Sports are always unifying because everyone gets to play. That's the idea. If you're good enough, you can play. Doesn't matter where you're from. We talked about this earlier in the sense of the Olympics, in that they're also, they're letting the Russian athletes compete, just not as Russia. Who knows if that's going to happen with Israel this summer? I doubt it, but
it would be. I'd be surprised. Also, just because I feel like the U.S. has enough power and they cause enough of a
Totally.
stink.
And then you'd have to like
but it would
get
be
any country at war, and it's a whole thing.
We don't need to get into the double standards of why China is still allowed to participate in all these things.
Exactly.
But
Indonesia.
it is, Gabe, thank you for staying up late to accommodate
of
me
course.
on this
This
one.
was a blast. It was wonderful recording with you, getting deep into the conversations, getting thoughtful, going deep beyond the surface, what it means to be a bench warmer. And I want to be, the first in terms of our thousands of listeners to thank Michael for guesting on this episode tonight. Normally he's on the other side of the microphone, on the other side of the camera, but we were honored and thrilled to have him, lugubriate on our show this evening.
And I'm happy to say this on air for the first time, but Gabe, please stop touching your microphone.
Yes, I only did it at the end. I was trying to think of the right word to say, and lugubriate was the best I could come up with.
Well, do you want to have a stab at the ending credits in lieu of James?
Ahem. Thanks for listening to the Benchwarmers. We are, as always, part of the CJN Podcast Network. Tonight's episode was produced and guest hosted by Michael Freeman. So thanks again to Michael for being here. You can find us and other CJN podcasts at the cjn.ca/podcasts, or anywhere you find these little nuggets of radio on demand, of which we are all so hopelessly in love. Have a wonderful week.